हेलो स्टूडेंट्स, आज का हमारा टॉपिक है इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट। Input tax credit, that is ITC, means claiming the credit of the GST paid on the purchase of goods and services which are used for the furtherance of business. The mechanism of input tax credit is the backbone of GST, is one of the most important reason for the introduction of GST. Under the earlier system of taxation, credit of tax imposed by central government is not available for payment of taxes imposed by state government and vice versa. But it is possible in the present system of GST. Input tax credit under GST is a credit which is available to supplier to set off the tax he has paid on the purchase of goods from output tax on the sale of such goods. Hence, the tax will leave on the value added, which results in avoiding double taxation. For example, you are a manufacturer. Tax payable on final product is rupees 450. Tax paid on input is, that is purchases, is rupees 300. You can claim input credit of rupees 300 and you only need to pay rupees 150, that is 450 minus 300, 150 as taxes. Input tax section 262 of CGST Acts define input tax as follow. Input tax in relation to a registered person means the CGST, SGST, IGST and Union Territory tax, that is UTGST, charged on any supply of goods or services or both made to him and includes the integrated goods and services tax charged on import of goods, the tax payable under the provision of subsection 3 and 4 of section 9, that is reverse charge of CGST, tax payable under the provision of subsection 3 and 4 of section 5 of integrated goods and services tax, reverse charge of GST, the tax payable under the provision of subsection 3 and subsection 4 of section 9 of the respective state goods and services tax, and the tax payable under the provision of subsection 3 and 4 of section 7 of Union Territory Goods and Services Tax Act, but does not include the tax paid under the composition. Input tax credit of CGST, SGST, UTGST and IGST. GST comprises of following leaves: Central Goods and Services Tax, also known as Central Tax, which is levied on intrastate or intra-union territory of supply of goods or services or both. State Goods and Services Tax, also known as state tax, which is levied on the supply of goods or services or both within same state, that is within say हरियाणा में अम्बाला और करनाल के बीच में. Then Union Territory Goods and Services Tax, also known as Union Territory Tax, which is levied on supply of goods or services within the same Union Territory. And Integrated Goods and Services Tax, also known as Integrated Tax on interstate supply of goods or services or both, that is between Punjab and Haryana. The input tax credit of these components of GST would be allowed in following manner. तो किस प्रकार से हम इनपुट टैक्स का इस्तेमाल करेंगे? सबसे पहले क्रेडिट ऑफ CGST, allowed first of the payment of CGST, और जो भी बैलेंस बचेगा will be utilized for the payment of IGST. Next is credit of SGST or UTGST, allowed first for the payment of SGST or UTGST and the balance can be utilized for the payment of IGST. Then third one is credit of IGST, allowed first for the payment of IGST, then payment of CGST and balance for the payment of IGST. CGST will be first utilized for the payment of CGST and then IGST. The next is SGST. SGST will be first utilized for payment of SGST and then IGST. Finally, UTGST. Credit will be first available for UTGST and then IGST. Eligibility and condition for taking input tax credit. Eligibility for taking input tax credit has been explained in section 16 subsection 1, and conditions for taking input tax credit has been explained in section 16 subsection 2. Eligibility for taking input tax credit, section 16(1). According to section 16(1), every registered person shall be entitled to take credit of input tax. यानी हर registered व्यक्ति जो कि इनपुट टैक्स का क्रेडिट ले सकता है. कुछ एलिजिबिलिटी पैरामीटर दिए गए हैं टू टेकिंग द बेनिफिट ऑफ इनपुट टैक्स क्रेडिट अंडर जीएसटी. द फर्स्ट इज रजिस्टर्ड पर्सन. Registration is prerequisite for availment of credit in GST law, and every registered person shall be entitled to take credit of input tax. Next is supply used in business. Every registered person shall be entitled to take credit of input tax charged on any supply to him which was used or intended to be used in the course or furtherance of business. It means if the supply is used for business, then we can take the input tax credit benefit, but we cannot take input tax credit benefit if it was supply was used for personal benefits. Then ITC shall be credited to the electronic ledger. Input tax credit amount shall be credited to the electronic credit ledger of such person. So these are the eligibilities for taking input tax. Conditions for claiming input tax credit under section 16(2). Number 1 is only a registered person would be able to claim the benefit of input tax credit of GST. Moreover, registered person would be eligible to claim input tax credit on the fulfillment of following condition. तो registered person को कुछ conditions को fulfill करना पड़ेगा, तभी उसके बाद वो eligible होगा input tax credit के लिए. First condition है कि he is in a possession of tax invoice or any other specific tax paid document. So no registered person shall be entitled to the credit of any input tax in respect of any supply of goods or services or both to him unless he in possession of tax invoice or debit note issued by a supplier registered under this act or such other tax paying document as may be prescribed. Next condition है he has received the goods or services. Bill to ship scenario is also included. The next condition is no registered person shall be entitled to the credit of any input tax in respect of any supply of goods or services or both to him unless he has received the goods or services or both. तो goods और services को actual में receive करना जरूरी है. It shall be deemed, ये समझा जाएगा कि that the registered person has received the goods where the goods are delivered by the supplier to a recipient or any other person on the direction or to such registered person, whether acting as an agent or otherwise before or during the moment of goods, either by way of transfer of good documents of title to the goods or services. Otherwise, next is tax is actually paid by the supplier. No registered person shall be entitled to the credit of any input tax in respect of any supply of goods or services or both to him unless the tax charge in respect of such supply has been actually paid to the government either in cash or through utilization of ITC admissal in respect of such supply. Next is he has furnished the GSTR return. So no registered person shall be entitled to the credit of any input tax in respect of any supply of goods or services or both to him unless he has furnished the monthly return under section 39 in form GSTR 3. Next है if inputs are received in lots or installment, he would be eligible to avail the ITC only when the last lot or installment is received. So if goods are received in lots, suppose in the month of January, February and March, and invoice was already issued in the month of January for full value, the ITC can be claimed only in the month of March when the total supply has been received. The payment should be, next is, the payment should be made within 180 days from the date of issue of invoice. तो within 180 days पेमेंट करनी है, otherwise ITC का क्रेडिट आपको नहीं मिलेगा. However, once the amount is paid, the recipient would be entitled to avail the credit again. In case part payment has made, proportionate credit will be allowed. Now, next is documents on the basis of which ITC can be claimed. The documents on the basis of which ITC can be claimed are given under section 16(3). So, no registered person shall be entitled to the credit of any input tax in respect of any supply of goods or services or both to him unless he is in the possession of following documents. Which documents were required? Invoice issued by supplier of goods or services or both. A tax invoice is issued by the supplier registered under CGST Act. Invoice issued by recipient along with proof of payment of tax. In case of reverse charge, where recipient is liable to pay tax, a tax invoice issued by recipient registered under CGST Act. Debit note, a debit note issued by a supplier registered under this act. Bill of lading, bill of entry or similar documents prescribed under the Custom Act. Revised invoice, document issued by input service distributor. Next is ITC allowed only for goods or services used for business. Input tax credit is not allowed for goods or services used for personal use. So only for business purpose ITC is allowed. When goods and services are received partly for business and partly for personal use, suppose we have purchased goods worth rupees 1 lakh and 50,000 were for business and 50,000 for personal use, then input tax credit will be available only for rupees 50,000. When goods and services are used partly for taxable supplies and partly for exempt supplies, one can avail ITC only for the portion used for making taxable supply and zero rated supplies. And ITC is not allowed on the portion used for making exempt supply. Next is a person switching over to normal scheme from composition scheme. जो व्यक्ति composition scheme से normal scheme के आया है under section 10 is also entitled to ITC in respect of goods held in stock and capital on the date immediately preceding the day from which he becomes liable to pay tax as a normal. Now next is provisions for taking input tax credit on inputs and capital goods sent out for job work. Sometimes we send our goods, capital goods or inputs for job work. In that case, what are the provision for input tax credit under GST? Principal would send, who sends goods or inputs or capital goods to the job worker for a job work purposes and is also entitled to take input tax credit on such inputs or capital goods. Input tax credit is also available in the case of inputs or capital goods sent directly from the place of supplier to the place of job worker without being first brought to the principal place of business. Suppose I am the principal place of business and I buy it from some supplier and I send it directly to the place of job worker. So I also entitled to get the benefit of input tax credit. Next is input tax credit is also available for input sent out for job work after completion of job work should be received back by the principal or should be supplied from the place of job worker within 1 year from the date on when such input sent out for job work. Next is the capital goods sent out for job work after completion of job work should be received back by the principal or should be supplied from the place of job worker within 3 years from the date on when such capital goods sent out for job. Next is, if the inputs or capital goods sent directly to the job worker from the place of supplier, then the date of receipt by the job worker is considered for the purpose of calculating the period of 1 year or 3 years. So this date is also very important. Next is, if the inputs or capital goods are not received back or not supplied from the place of job worker after completion of job worker within 1 year or 3 years respectively as stipulated, then the same shall be considered as supply, and the date on when the inputs or capital goods is sent out for the job work is deemed to be the date of supply. So if the inputs or capital goods once are not received back or not supplied from the place of job worker, अगर वो हमें job worker को लौटाता नहीं है after completion of job worker within 1 year or 3 year respectively as stipulated, तो हम उसे supply समझेंगे. Molds, dies, jigs and fixtures or tools which sent out to a job worker for a job purpose are not necessarily received back. So ये जो छोटी मोटी चीज़ें होती हैं ये ज़रूरी नहीं है कि रिसीव बैक की जाए. द स्टिपुलेटेड पीरियड ऑफ 1 year or 3 years shall not apply. So this is our today's topic. Thank you for watching. If you have queries, you can ask.